So I'm going to go ahead, Kath, and
share your screen. Let's dive in.
All right. Okay. Can I get a quick thumbs up if everyone can see that lead slide? Perfect. All right. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Kath and I are really excited to be with you this morning. Thanks, Amy Currens, for the emoji. That's great. You have all been so incredibly intrinsic to what was a very, very, very successful presentation at Wine to Wine in Verona last month. And so what we wanted to spend some time today is to share with you both the insights that we had from the survey that you all generously gave us your time to do, and also some of the insights that we pulled from a combination of obviously your input, some of the industry trends we're seeing, and also some action items that we can start to start to push out to the broader community. So like I said, this is a recording. It'll be available on the website. Yeah, let's get underway. So the question for Wine to Wine was, can working in the wine business really be good for you? And really that's why we came to you all and said, you know, can you help us answer that question? I'm just going to admit a couple more people. These are the fearless two presenters that went to Verona. This pretty much captures Kath and I in our full spirit. By the way, we are drinking a shrub, Kath, right?
It was so good. And I noticed that mine's just about gone and you're still sipping yours. True to form, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. It was delicious. Okay, so who is ABG? You are ABG, is the easiest way to say this. And some of these are slides we presented, and some of these are slides that are just exclusively for our group. So this was a slide that we presented to give some understanding of who a balanced glass is. And really what makes our community unique is that we span everything from ground to glass. And our community is everything from operations and technical staff all the way through the supply chain, through to agency and industry services staff. So we really do cover a wide group of professionals. And that's a lot of how we try to profile people in the industry so that you can meet and get to know other people with like-minded interests in the business. Scroll. There we go. So Kath, this is over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Beck. And I wanted to underscore the fact that what we're recording in this webinar today and presenting to you is, as Beck said, above and beyond what we presented actually at Wine to Wine, because we wanted it to be more personal. We held some things back in order to speak more directly, more intimately to the people who gave us their time, your time, to complete the survey. So there were a couple of things about the survey that were surprising, frankly. But I wanted to start by profiling a little bit, or kind of fleshing out a little bit more who we are, but also the fact that this is sort of a world premiere opportunity that we're going into around the question of, can working in the wine business really actually be good for you? It sounds a little bit like a provocative question because, you know, is alcohol good for you? Are the spirits good for you? Or the kind of hours that we try to keep, that we need to keep, actually in any way healthy in any way, shape, or form? So the short answer is yes. The short answer is from the community. The response was a pretty resounding, I would say, Beck. Would you agree? A pretty resounding, like, yes, we like being in this community. It is good for us. That there's also a but, and you may have seen this in some of the writings that Beck and I have done since Wine to Wine. Yes, working in the wine industry can be good for you, but there's a but, and some pretty significant buts that are worth noting as well. But for the first time, we wanted to really summarize the takeaways for this group, but also to show you more of the granularity, more of sort of how the responses really kind of played out, rather than just the surface summary that we presented at Wine to Wine. So here we go. So a little bit, and then Beck, I hope that you'll talk a little bit more about the methodology of it. But this is who the ABG community is. You might recognize, hopefully you will recognize many of these people. These are our friends, these are our colleagues, these are the people who do ride-alongs when we do a market visit, these are the people who are critics who we're pouring wine for, these are the people who are pouring wine for us. This is some of the hundreds and thousands really of people who comprise the ABG community. The newsletters, for example, go out to more than 800 people every week. We've profiled more than 150 people in the community profiles, which happens, which are a featured part of the newsletter and the blog post every week. And just to kind of, we just love these faces. We love the diversity of the group, of the audience, that Beck works really hard to set the tone, that this is a very rounded, a very global, a very diverse group of people that comprise ABG, who we are listening to on a regular basis. Beck, is there anything else you want to say about the methodology?
Yeah, exactly. So I think before we dive into this first insight, so the methodology of this was obviously a short lead, anonymous survey where responses were taken with no identification at all. So we had no identification of location, gender, ethnicity, profession, nothing. And the second part is we actually had quite a bit of room for verbatim comments. And you'll see a lot of those through the presentation. You all know this was a super short lead. I think we did this in 4 weeks. And you'll see the responses that we're using. There's about 80 responses. And what it became was more of a focus group than a survey, because of the richness of a lot of the content that came out. And again, you all contributed to this. So if there's something in here, you're like, you want to know more about something, we don't have a ton of time to cover them today, but there's probably some insights in the kind of verbatim comments that we're happy to share with you more detail on. Like I said, there's no identification of any of the responses. So yeah, it was definitely in line with a lot of macro trends we're seeing in the industry. And also I think some really specialized responses that really we as wine professionals are probably seeing more than others. So Kath, I'm going to give this first insight to you.
Yeah, thanks. So this was one of the big surprises for me, looking at the results. Simple question, how would you rate your general well-being now relative to pre-COVID times? So you could see a very relatively small percentage, only 17%, said that they feel worse off about their well-being now than they did prior to COVID. 46% said they feel better than they did prior to COVID, and 36% said they feel about the same. So for me, this was an eye-opener. This was a surprise. I was like, hang on a second, like, how is it that this community of ABG is managing ourselves, is managing our well-being, is managing to come out feeling healthier in a physical way, in an emotional way, in a psychological way, in a spiritual way, than we did through just the chaos and the tragedy of COVID. So obviously there's some bias in here in terms of the self-selection of the respondents. And clearly you all are aware and proactive around your well-being, but to see it so clearly kind of laid out mathematically and quantitatively like this was for me a surprise. Beck, anything you want to add to that part? Next question though is over to you.
Yeah, so this was really this was question 2, right? Which said, okay, now we know where you're at. What are some of the ways that you've been cultivating your wellness while working in the wine business? And overwhelmingly, again, people are really taking very individualistic approaches to how they're managing their health. And I would say, again, the full descriptions are not listed here, but something like lower intensity exercise, walking, being outside, taking exercise that's not high intensity, high strain on your physical body, choosing more moderate or gentle ways of keeping your exercise in order so that your physical body's moving, but you're not, trying to do a TRX session or trying to do a 45-minute hit. Reading was a really interesting one for me, as someone who, I read all day. So probably the last thing I want to do to relax is to read. But it's a really big way that people were finding to manage their own wellness. Meditation came up, which again, Kath, to your point, self-selected group. So this one wasn't a surprise so much. High intensity exercise, I wonder how many Pelotons were bought during COVID, the amount of self-motivation that had to happen in order for people, again, to feel like they're getting this at the fix, right? The ability to move their bodies. And then, journaling and counseling and therapy. And we talk a lot about this in the community. And even the fact that people are putting this down as an action item, I think speaks volumes to how, honest this community is. And really that, as we've always said, it's a long-term objective to kind of shift a lot of stigma and judgment maybe in the industry. And so to see these kind of self-care exercises, I think is awesome. But not surprisingly, 12% of people, and I dare say it's much higher, don't have the time. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but COVID has exacerbated so many existing issues and conditions in the industry as it relates to, working and parenting, as it relates to women in the workforce, the demands of just homeschooling and figuring it out. People still don't have the time they need to make this a priority. And that's understandable. So, Kath, is there anything else on this?
Just very, very briefly, two of the top three things here, reading and meditation, with the lower intensity possibly sort of crossing over into this as well, are very introspective. They're individual, they're quiet activities. They're quiet, they're introspective, they're internal. And possibly some of the lower intensity exercises as well. And I just wanted to maybe point to that as a counterbalance to the very social nature of our work. Very few of us drink wine alone. We're always, it's always about with other people, or it's always about communicating, or it's always about interacting in some way or in some capacity. So here is just sort of, I think, an indicator of the attempt from people within our community to counterbalance that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Beck.
Yeah.
So I was particularly super psyched to see the results of this question. Some of the most influential concepts or themes that you've noticed that could have a positive impact on wellness in wine. Advocacy for diversity and DEI initiatives that came up again and again. And Beck is going to talk about it a little bit more in just a few minutes. The meta-tasting or contemplative tasting or meditative tasting or aware mindful consumption, that was, I would say, a very strong component that was sort of on repeat as well throughout the survey. And then you could see some of the others, increased awareness around overconsumption, or the sober curious movement, or low alcohol and no alcohol options. These are some of the things that we know are on your mind that are certainly on our minds as well. And just being able to point to them as very clear takeaways from the survey.
Yeah, and we can see here, this is obviously more than one, it was multiple choice. So a lot of people are interested in a number of different areas across the industry. So again, these details were not shared at Wine to Wine. This is really something that we are sharing just with you as community. The thematics we took, but these specifics we did not share. This was a really interesting mix of responses. How long do you intend to continue working in the wine industry? And the reason for the question was because so much of what we're seeing in the media right now, okay, is the great resignation, the great, the great transformation, people really going through COVID and really sitting deep on what they really want to be doing. And obviously we had enormous amount of loss in the hospitality industry, particularly of jobs and furloughs, and just that immense mental health impact that we had. And so we really wanted to know, like, do people really still want to continue working in the wine business? And 49% are saying, yes, I want to stay here. I don't want to go anywhere. 5 to 10 years was 23% of respondents said, I think I've got 5 to 10. That could be to do with the age of the respondents. It could also be to do with, maybe where they're at in their learning career. But that was a surprising number. 2 to 5 years, 18% of people said, within 2 to 5 years, I want to be doing something else. And nearly 10% of people said, I can't wait to get out. And that points to much deeper issues in the industry that, we obviously didn't identify in this survey, but the really deep personal choices people are making, I think, is reflected in some of these insights. Kath, is there anything on this?
Yeah, and to the percentage, half of people said they want to stay in the wine industry forever, despite the great resignation, despite the challenges of staying well when alcohol is at the center of our work. Despite all these things, it's still, an industry, an area, a workplace that we want to hang out in. We want to persevere. We want to continue to enjoy this work. And I feel like the next section, though, Beck, gets a little bit further into the buts. So yes, absolutely, we do want to stay in here, but there are some things that need to be factored into sort of moderating that enthusiastic response. So here are 3 key insights that we sort of distilled down from the survey responses. The first one was mindful consumption, where consumption means not only the beverages and what we're drinking, but also consumption of media, consumption of stimulation, consumption of or overconsumption, really, of so many of the things that sort of overflow our cups, as opposed to keeping them circulating in a healthy way. That was one of the 3 key insights. The second was the influence of culture on well-being, that Beck's going to talk to you in just a little bit. And this is tied to the third one, which is industry leadership. So the mindful consumption, you can think about it as kind of a concentric circle. The mindful consumption is at the individual level, each of us wanting to take responsibility for our own consumption of what we drink, of what we eat, of the media that we consume. The second key insight is a step outward, the influence of culture on well-being, meaning the culture of our workplaces. We do the work to generate wellness within ourselves at the individual level. And now I think during COVID, especially, what has become paramount is to take that wellness at the individual level and take a step out and make sure that it translates into the workplaces where we spend so much of our time. And then finally, the third sort of concentric circle is at the leadership level, those who are steering, or what we expect our leaders of our industries to steer this, the culture of our workplaces, which obviously then, to sort of retrace that concentric circle, then impacts us at the individual level as well. So 3 key insights. So mindful consumption, you might recognize Kat Thomas here, who is a sommelier in Las Vegas, and also the founder of Core Body and Mind. And Kat she's a yoga teacher. She's obviously a practitioner, and she has integrated her work very much with her practices of well-being. And she literally is in a way a poster child, so to speak, for this beautiful integration of those two things. As I said, the consumption here at the individual level is not only about the consumption of alcohol, consumption of wine, consumption of spirits, but consumption of the media around us, consumption of toxic workplaces, wanting to counterbalance that. And also one of the big takeaways was to be proactive around moderating our own interaction, sort of at the individual level. Again, the mindful consumption part. The next slide, Beck, please. Here is, and I love this quote taken directly verbatim from the survey. Well-being is more than just limiting consumption of alcohol or consumption of media, but it's about the limitations around the time that we have for ourselves. And it's nearly impossible to make mental and physical health a priority, much less limit consumption after a long day or week, or if we haven't taken the time to care for ourselves. Yeah, thanks, Beck. Let's go ahead and share some practical ideas, some practical suggestions, sort of that we have seen both in Beck and I in our own lives, as well as feedback that we've had from the community.
Can I jump in on this just quickly? Because what we're talking about here is one of the things for Wine to Wine. Obviously, we were talking to a primarily English as a second language audience. And one of the things that really was put to us was, okay, take your theoretical concepts and put them into things that people can do walking out the door tomorrow. So you'll see of the 3 key themes, to Kat's point, we kind of distilled obviously all of your input, but also a lot of what we're doing ourselves as a way to kind of give the audience members a real practical way to go out and do something with this information. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there to explain a little bit about where this came from.
Yeah, thanks very much, Beck. That was definitely the directive from the Wine to Wine organizers to walk away with some hands-on, like, how do I do this in my real life? So around the mindful consumption idea, which was one of the 3 key takeaways from the survey, some of the suggestions that Beck and I offered were around the 60-second pause. And this is something that I've integrated in my own work situations. I have a team meeting every day at 10 o'clock, for example, and we start every team meeting every day with just a 60-second moment, a 60-second period of quiet, just to gather our thoughts, just to transition from what else has been happening kind of out there into the focus and the concentration on the person in front of us and the work that's in front of us to do. And at first it was kind of weird, I have to say. And it's not like, my coworkers are necessarily the most, they don't have necessarily a practice of meditation or mindfulness, but we started doing this, and it's become, I think, a really important part of the flow of our conversation. We're more intentional about what we say after we take sort of literally just 60 seconds. I literally set a timer on the phone, 60 seconds to just be quiet and just, make that transition from sort of the chaos of everything else that's been happening into the focus of what's in front of us and the people who we are sharing with. So that was one of the practical ideas, suggestions. The second was the new meeting plan. And this is probably something that you have noticed as well, is that meetings with people, certainly, the difference between meeting virtually and meeting in person, but when we're meeting in person, there are considerations now that are COVID influenced, but also, it turns out, wellness influenced also. For example, I took a business trip to New York a couple of weeks ago, and every single meeting that I planned throughout the entire 2 days, there were considerations around, are we meeting? Yes, I want to have dinner with you. And where are we going to have dinner as long as it's outside? They have outdoor seating. yes, I want to have coffee with you, but can we walk and exercise and get some fresh air while we talk and drink our coffee? Yes, I want to have this conversation with you, and let's do it in a way that is either outdoors, if possible, or in a way that promotes movement, or in a way that promotes sort of something beyond just the business as usual that we had been used to. And then finally, self-moderation. And this goes to the idea of moderating not only the alcohol and the liquid intake, but the media intake as well. Literally deleting social media apps from our phone, literally not pulling it up in our browsers, or not scrolling before we go to bed at night. So that ability to moderate at the individual level were some of the key takeaways and practical ideas and suggestions around the mindful consumption. One of the 3 pillars of the survey.
Yeah, and Kath, on that self-moderation piece, I think nearly all of you are subscribers to the newsletter every week. If you're not, you can join us very easily. It's free. But one of the things we do every week is we have what we're reading, and we fill that reading with ways you can self-moderate, right? Because the reality is we're in an environment where the media is overrunning everything of our daily lives. And so that's part of the content we create to really help you to find practical ways, again, that you can self-moderate what you're, quote, consuming. Yeah. All right. This is a big one. So we kind of move from like what I am doing internally for my well-being, and this now changes the lens to look at the exterior of what the environment we're working in does or does not do for us. And so the next 2 kind of insights really talk about what we need as a community in order to have, quote, well-being. And so the first thing is, well-being is a lot more than moderation. It's financial wellness, it's emotional wellness. And at the end of it, it's really having a sense of safety and belonging in a community, or as we have in our profession. We definitely know community and support systems have been critical as we've come through COVID. And really, more than ever, coming out of maybe a new way of looking at how we are professionals in this industry, we want to have a way of feeling seen, of feeling heard and included in our daily work lives. And so that really comes down to the culture of the workplace that we're in, the culture of the community that we keep is incredibly fundamental to, at the end of the day, well-being. So for people who are, I know on this call, already working in DE&I space or already working in inclusion, this is something that I'm sure you're nodding your head at to say, we know this, we're doing this, we're working really hard. And for some of us who really work in, maybe we're working on our own, maybe this is, we're a sole operator. This is a way to demonstrate that this is an issue that is very clearly being communicated from, obviously an interested audience to say we need something to be better. So what does this mean, like having a culture that's inclusive and empowering? The first thing that came up for us was prioritizing flexibility for employees and allowing accommodations for people to manage their lives, and working families, particularly working mothers, finding ways for that group of people to really be and stay well. And the second thing is finding ways to find common ground. What we found is the blurred lines between professional life and personal life have really gone away as our professional lives have moved into our lounge rooms, or our kitchens, or our study space. And so again, coming back to being in an environment or a culture that allows us to have those really honest conversations of where we're at. The second thing that's really come through is people's relationships to alcohol have changed through COVID, and for good and for bad. And we definitely saw that feedback in the survey with verbatim quotes on either coming from challenges with managing consumption, or challenges with coming back into the workplace where maybe on a personal level, my consumption habits have changed, but maybe they're not aligning with the culture of the company that I'm maybe coming back to. And so, thinking about things like rethinking our company attitudes to, drinking at work or tasting, finding spaces for people to, maybe not consume at all, and really supporting them through that. So this was a quote again that came through verbatim. Taking care of employees and supporting their well-being pays huge dividends, even if they're not monetary. Productivity would be greater if the wine industry cared more about well-being of their employees. And again, this is a really insightful viewpoint from one of our members to say, we now need a value system that cares about us beyond what we contribute monetarily to a business. This is a trend we see across business. Just read Entrepreneur or Inc. or the Wall Street Journal, you'll see this thematic. But really, again, coming at us from a personal perspective. So, practical ideas, let's just give some actionable things to be doing. The first big thing that came out of this was protocols for drinking in the workplace. We've seen this time and time again, really since A Balanced Glass started in 2018. Very few companies have protocols or cultural models for what is considered consumption at work, drinking at work. What's my policy on drinking or tasting as part of my job? And so again, this is the first thing we're saying. Take some time. If you're in a position to drive the conversation, please do. If you're in a position to ask the question, we're happy to help you support and find ways to ask those questions. But this was definitely something that came up. The second thing, and we saw this as the most important insight, was diversity and inclusion, taking that interest beyond the HR function and really putting it into a way to create a safer and more inclusive space for people to be well and to be healthy. And the third thing is developing compassionate spaces. And this is something that some of this may correlate back to staying in the industry. We see a lot of blur between relationships within companies and self-value and, well, I'm part of this family at work. So there are maybe groups that self-form where community is felt, but there's a lot of people who are not feeling that ability to have these really tough conversations because they're very personal. And so one thing that we really think is important is to develop those compassionate spaces. Kath, anything on this before we move on?
No, just real quick, Beck. The notion around bringing that individual wellness, that mindful consumption at the individual level, and bringing it into the workplace, and taking that responsibility. It's not just about me. It's about us. It's about the people who I spend time with. And in a work situation, obviously, a lot of time. And a lot of time in various times of the day, and some stressful situations. So let's not. I want to take care of myself, but I also want to take care of the environment and the people that I spend a lot of time with.
Yeah, great, thanks. So industry leadership. I love this question on the right of the side of this building. How are you really? And one of the loudest pieces of feedback that we heard was really around the demands of people to really look to industry leadership to start to take action in this area. There is only so much as individuals that people can be doing for their own self-care. And really, it's coming back to really having leadership that can step up and really start to drive this change. And I will definitely say we've probably seen more development in this area in the last 2 years than really in the last 4, since we really even started looking at this as a subject. So it's headed in the right direction, but we're definitely not there yet. The first comment is what we had from from one of our verbatim comments, I think the conversations are beginning to happen, and you can see wine businesses posting about wellness and wages and opportunities, but I don't see a lot of action. And again, this is really coming back to the concept that our lines between personal and professional have blurred. And people are really asking, what do I need to do my job well? And so the onus is on us as leaders, and putting onus on leaders in the industry to really show up and show how you're caring for your people. And the first thing, as we know, is making financial investments in things like pay equity, in working on inclusion and diversity of leadership, and creating financial security so that people can find a way to feel safe and to perform at a higher level in the industry. Finding ways to improve flexibility to meet the demands of working families. There again is a lot of progress in this area, but is that really enough? We think that this conversation needs to get a lot better. And really having leadership start to model the behavior of what they want to see from their workforce. And that's probably the big part, and that was really one of our 3 key insights as practical ideas. You know, modeling the behavior is probably the most important thing that leaders can be doing. And when we ask the question of what are some of the things you're seeing of this community, you know, there was examples given of, well, my employer offers us a yoga class on a Friday, free of charge, or they've given us the Calm app or the Headspace app to download. They've offered us a fitness or a gym membership, which is fantastic. But we also want to see leadership physically and visibly modeling that behavior. So it's as simple as, if you have a workout, put it on your calendar like you would put any meeting. Show and demonstrate how you are making this a priority. Financially investing in your employees. Again, we know this is a big talking point for the industry. And again, it came through loud and clear in the insights. The third thing is a little bit of it's not a get off scot-free, but it's to say, prioritize and focus your efforts. If you are an industry leader, you cannot do it all. And I don't think there's an expectation that is possible, but definitely prioritize what is important to your teams, and focus on that. And that as a way to make visible and long-lasting change. We had an example given of a restaurant who have been giving guided meditation and movement sessions before service. And they found that that is their way of advancing this discussion. They also have one-on-one check-ins that are not performance related. So they're nothing to do with your checks or your tables or your sections. It was just really a check-in to say, how are you doing? And the feedback from the community member who gave us that said that, you know, productivity has increased. And, you know, it's definitely something that we are seeing in once management and leadership are as part of these self-care approaches as the people that they are providing opportunities for, they're seeing change. So, Kath, anything on that?
Well, just to the turnover at that restaurant, who's doing the check-ins, is almost nothing. Like it's almost zero. So that just goes to the previous point around productivity, but also taking care of the workplace culture, right? That's a great example, both of leadership and workplace culture. I also just wanted, before we kind of move into the last section, Beck, just wanted to say that the leadership component is a very big part of the but. Yes, we can stay well while working in this industry, but boy, do we need leaders to take up to step up. Mm-hmm. That's I would say, at least to my hearing back, and I hope you agree that that was the most resonant, definitely the loudest, but that we heard was that, sure, I can take care of myself and I can take care of the people I work with, but we really need leaders to be more proactive and to be more visible and transparent about what they're doing to create this industry that I want to stay in for, half of us for forever.
Yeah, and this is a great lead into our final slide, which Anne Mukherjee is the CEO of Pernod Ricard North America, and they've been very proactive in their stance on, particularly on alcohol, and really talking about responsibility. And she says there are a lot of things we stand against, but no one really takes on the issue that alcohol is at the intersection of a lot of issues. If you truly want to be responsible, you can't hide behind it. It's time for us, if we are asking consumers to be responsible, to stand up and talk about what that means. And again, it's a call to action for the industry. And Anne is someone leading by example in this field through a lot of the work that Pernod Ricard are doing. So to say that, it is possible and it is important. And again, this really encapsulated a lot of what we were hearing from the community. So Kath, that's it from me. I'm going to stop sharing if you're good with that. And
absolutely.
Yeah, we've got 3 minutes until we need to jump off. So I don't know if there's any questions. If there are, you can throw them in the chat, get yourself off mute. But to say that I think definitely the conversation at Wine to Wine, we only had 30 minutes to present. And there was a lot of discussion around the crossover between, is this just the alcohol industry that faces these issues, or are there other industries such as the entertainment business, the legal industry that have these issues? The short answer is we think yes, but we have no quantifiable data to say that. And the balance between personal health responsibility and well-being and really the external of what we're looking for from industry.
Yeah, and I feel like, Beck, maybe the last thing that I would want to say is around the feedback that we've gotten and the opportunities that are emerging for a balanced glass to ourselves take a leadership role in promoting what we're talking about here and developing programming and continuing on this path that we have been cultivating. I feel like that is an important part of the future and sort of where things are going. And so are you. So are you for participating in the survey. So are you for coming to this live session. So are you if you're coming back and watching it as a recording later on. Thank you to all of that, because that is, it's generative, right? Like it keeps us going. You're feeding the cycle that is moving, I think, in the right direction.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us live. And again, if you're seeing this recording, I hope it has been helpful to you. If you have any feedback for us, the easiest email to get both of us is hello@abalancedglass.com, or you can always get Kath and I directly on our own emails, which is Rebecca@abalancedglass.com and Kathy@abalancedglass.com. So there you go. We've loved having you. Thank you for hanging in there for 50 minutes. And you are very, very welcome. Thanks for joining. Have a great week. Stay well. And good luck with OND.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.